I am Charlotte Madison, 33 years old, and if you had glanced at my life from the outside, you might think I was one of the lucky ones. Just a month ago, I crossed a marble stage in a navy cap and gown earning my MBA from Columbia, a moment that should have felt like a coronation after years of sacrifice. I had just closed on my dream penthouse high above Manhattan's evening traffic, a home that I paid for with the money I earned, not inherited, not borrowed, but built with quiet tenacity. But let me tell you, none of these things, no diploma, no penthouse, no shiny achievement, ever seemed to matter to the people who should have loved me most. If you have ever stood in a room full of celebration and still felt utterly invisible, then you know exactly the kind of ache I carried with me. My family always played favorites, though they would never admit it out loud. The real star of the Madison clan was my younger sister Olivia. She is 3 years my junior, a Harvard-educated surgeon with a penchant for saving lives and collecting praise. Olivia was the golden child our parents prided their proof that they had done something right. At family dinners, my father would toast to Dr. Olivia's latest paper while my mother showed off clippings of Olivia's charity work as if she alone kept the world turning. When I brought home a scholarship letter, my mother would say, "That's nice, dear Olivia, just got published in the New England Journal of Medicine." When Olivia bought her second apartment, our father called the entire extended family to share the news. When I received a promotion at the marketing firm, he simply nodded and asked if Olivia would be attending the gala for the hospital's new wing. Looking back, I can see the pattern stretched across decades, as clear and deliberate as wallpaper in an old house. My 10th birthday, one I had dreamed about for months, was abruptly cancelled because Olivia had a piano recital downtown. "Your sister has worked so hard for this," my mother said, tucking away the unused candles and cake mix. "We'll do your party another day." Another day never came. At my high school graduation, my parents left before my speech so they could catch Olivia's track meet. "You'll understand when you have children," my father said. "It's impossible to be everywhere at once." When it was time for college, my parents dipped into the family trust to pay for Olivia's Ivy League tuition. For me, they said state school would build character, and I took out student loans that I paid off over 12 years. Still, I tried to be the dutiful daughter, the reliable one. After all, that was the role I had been assigned. When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, I took unpaid leave from work, moved home, and quietly covered her medical expenses, $110,000, without ever signing my name to the hospital bills. When Olivia wanted a down payment for her first apartment, I set up a quiet wire transfer disguised as a family gift. They never knew. Not once did anyone ask who kept the lights on when things got tight or who refilled the fridge when my father lost his job for 6 months. They just assumed luck had turned in their favor. If you have ever been the reliable one, the invisible support holding up the family tent, then you know the exhaustion that comes from being both indispensable and overlooked. Some days I felt frustrated, other days numb. Most days I told myself it was enough to be needed even if I was never celebrated. What I did not realize was how deep the cracks ran beneath our family's polished surface. As the invitations went out for my graduation party, a celebration in the penthouse I had bought with my own hands, I felt a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, this time things would be different. I sent each invitation by hand, called my mother to confirm the date, even promised Olivia the guest room with the best view of Central Park. But as the days ticked by and their responses grew vague, "We'll try our best. Olivia is so busy at the hospital," a familiar sense of dread crept in. Little did I know that this party, this night I hoped would heal old wounds, would become the stage for the greatest humiliation and the beginning of my true independence. Before I continue, let me know where you are listening from. And if you have ever stood in the shadow of someone else's spotlight, hit that like button, because you and I, well, we have a lot in common. The day of my graduation party dawned cool and bright, the kind of New York morning that makes you believe in second chances. I woke before sunrise, restless with anticipation, then wandered through rooms I still couldn't quite believe belonged to me. Every detail was exactly as I'd pictured it: flowers from the corner market, candles flickering in hurricane glass, a jazz trio setting up near the window that framed the city skyline. I laid out dishes that I'd spent the whole week preparing: crab cakes, little smoked salmon tartlets, an array of pastries that would have made my grandmother proud. It was in every sense a feast for the people I had spent a lifetime trying to please. I checked my phone again, no new messages from my family. But I told myself not to worry. People get busy, plans change. Maybe they were on their way, stuck in traffic, or maybe Olivia's last-minute surgery had run long. I could imagine my mother fussing over the perfect bouquet to bring my father double-checking directions. Hope, I've learned, is a stubborn thing. By 6 o'clock, the first guests began to arrive. Colleagues from the marketing firm, a few friends from business school, my old mentor who had insisted on bringing his famous lemon cake. They hugged me, handed over bottles of wine and cards, and marveled at the view. I kept glancing at the elevator, waiting for the familiar faces. By 7, the penthouse was full of laughter and music, but still no sign of my family. My best friend Lila caught my eye. She had flown in from San Francisco, bringing stories of her latest startup and a sense of calm I desperately needed. "They'll come," she said quietly, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "They always do eventually." I wanted to believe her. Then as the clock chimed 8, my phone buzzed. I excused myself from a conversation, heart racing. Maybe it was my mother telling me they were in the lobby. Instead, it was a notification, an alert from our extended family group chat, a place usually reserved for birthday greetings and holiday photos. Someone had sent a message accidentally, I suppose, but it had gone to everyone, a screenshot of a private conversation between Olivia and my parents. The message read in stark, unfiltered words, "We only show up for real achievements, not these side projects. Charlotte will understand. She's always been good at being on her own." My hands shook as I read it again, the words blurring. Within seconds, phones around the room began to buzz. The message, it turned out, had also been leaked somehow onto a wider social chat. Friends began to look up from their plates. A hush fell over the crowd. Lila moved to shield me, but I was already exposed. For years, I'd swallowed disappointment in private. Now my family's true feelings had been broadcast to a room of witnesses, and soon enough the whole world. I wish I could say I handled it with perfect poise. Instead, I set down my wine, forced a smile, and excused myself to the balcony. Outside, the city's lights blinked indifferently. My phone buzzed with notifications, sympathy texts, awkward apologies. I could hear voices inside, some angry, some embarrassed for me, some simply stunned. Minutes later, Lila joined me, holding out a glass of water. "You don't have to pretend, Char. Not with me." I let myself crumble just for a moment. "I did everything right, Lila. I worked, I saved, I invited them. And still I'm the one left standing alone." She nodded, eyes sharp. "Sometimes family is just a lottery, Char. But you get to choose who stays next." Back inside the party, limped along. My mentor made an awkward toast, something about resilience and new beginnings. I accepted hugs, reassurances, and offers to call a car. But the truth was clear: the people I had worked so hard to please had chosen once and for all to humiliate me. As the evening wound down, a second twist arrived. My mother's attorney, who had accepted my invitation out of old loyalty, quietly handed me an envelope. Inside was a notice, a formal amendment to the family trust drafted only days earlier. I was being written out, effective immediately. No explanation, no conversation. Just a legal document slipped between canopies and jazz tunes. If you've ever experienced betrayal in public, you know it is a unique kind of pain. But in that moment, as the city rolled on beneath my balcony and the last guest slipped out the door, a strange clarity settled over me. I had spent my life begging for scraps of affection from people determined to withhold it. Now I was free to let go. Have you ever been humiliated by those closest to you? If so, I'd like to hear your story in the comments below. And if you're still standing after it all, well, maybe that's a kind of victory too. The days after the party passed in a quiet haze. I moved through my beautiful penthouse as if I were a guest, each room heavy with the memory of what I'd hoped that night would become. I found myself drawn back through the years, searching for the source of this deep divide, wondering if there had ever been a moment where things could have turned out differently. Growing up in the Madison family was like living inside a carefully staged photograph. My parents valued appearances, achievement, and above all, comparison. My earliest memories are filled with Olivia's laughter echoing through the hallways, her artwork taped to the fridge, her report cards paraded at dinner. Even as a child, I understood my place. I was the reliable one, the old soul who set the table, who listened quietly as Olivia recited lines for the school play. There were, of course, moments when I believed things might change. I remember one rainy Saturday in the 4th grade when I won a citywide essay contest. The prize was a $250 savings bond, and my essay was printed in the local paper. I ran home beaming, expecting celebration. Instead, my mother greeted me at the door, distracted by Olivia's fever. "That's nice, honey," she said, handing me a bottle of ginger ale. "But Olivia has a recital in 2 days." She needs quiet. I took my newspaper clipping upstairs and pressed it flat between the pages of a book, learning for the first time how to shrink my pride. When I was 16, I saved up all summer to buy my own laptop for school. It took every dollar from my weekend job at the bookstore. Olivia, meanwhile, mentioned offhand at dinner that her old computer was slow. The next day, my father bought her the newest model without a second thought. Olivia needs it for her science project, he explained, not unkindly, as if that justified everything. I began to understand the rules of our house. What Olivia needed, she got. What I needed, I earned or did without. College was the real dividing line. My acceptance letter to Columbia came with joy and relief until I saw the financial aid package. My parents had always promised to help with college, but when the time came, most of the savings were spent on Olivia's Harvard tuition and summer programs abroad. I was told gently that there simply wasn't enough left. I took out loans, applied for scholarships, and juggled 2 jobs throughout undergrad. Olivia called home for help with rent. I learned how to stretch a week's groceries from a single chicken and a sack of rice. In my 20s, I still tried to bridge the gap. Every Christmas, I sent thoughtful gifts, remembered birthdays, offered to help with family gatherings. My efforts were met with polite gratitude, quickly overshadowed by Olivia's stories from the hospital, her photos with colleagues, her charity runs. If I spoke about my work or my struggles, the conversation shifted, as if my reality was less substantial, less urgent. There were attempts at reconciliation. After my mother's illness, I called more often, hoping we might connect as adults. But the conversations were shallow, drifting always back to Olivia, the latest research grant, her new apartment, the pressure she felt saving lives. Once I asked my mother if she was proud of me. She hesitated, then said, "Of course, darling. You've always been so independent. You don't need as much from us." The words landed like a door closing. It dawned on me slowly that my self-sufficiency had become an excuse for their neglect. The final blow came not with anger, but with clarity. In the days after the party, as word of the group chat leak spread and I received messages of sympathy from acquaintances and strangers alike, I realized something fundamental. I could keep chasing approval forever, or I could build a life where I didn't need it. I began to see my independence not as a burden, but as a gift. Lila, as always, was the first to understand. "You've been carrying this family for years, Char. Maybe it's time to let them carry themselves. You have people who care about you not because they have to, but because they want to." Her words stuck with me. That week, I packed away old photographs and mementos, boxing up the evidence of a lifetime spent chasing someone else's version of success. I took myself to dinner in a little French bistro, ordered the nicest wine on the menu, and toasted to freedom, to self-respect, to a future where my worth wasn't measured in anyone else's shadow. If you've ever woken up and realized it was time to put yourself first, you know the strange mixture of grief and relief that follows. The turning point isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, like the first rays of sunlight after a long gray winter. Little did I know, letting go of my family would be the first step toward reclaiming my own story, and that the next chapter would bring an unexpected opportunity for justice. In the days following the party, a silence settled over my life that was both unfamiliar and oddly welcome. My family had gone to ground, no calls, no apologies, no awkward explanations. I imagined them huddled around Olivia's dining table, concocting damage control strategies, lamenting the way their private opinions had spilled into the world. My own phone, on the other hand, hummed with messages from friends, colleagues, and even a handful of sympathetic strangers. Some offered words of encouragement, others shared their own stories of being the overlooked child, the one left off the invitation list, the outsider in their own home. To my surprise, the incident sparked a quiet wave of attention. A journalist from a popular lifestyle blog reached out, curious about my story, about what it meant to build a life on your own terms, to succeed in spite of family rather than because of it. I hesitated at first, wary of turning my pain into content, but Lila convinced me. "Your story isn't just about you, Char. It's about all of us who learn to survive outside the spotlight." So, with her support, I agreed to an interview. The article went viral within days, shared by people from all walks of life, each comment a reminder that while our circumstances might differ, the longing for recognition is nearly universal. With visibility came opportunity. One evening, as I sifted through emails in my kitchen, I found a message from Evelyn Hart, the managing partner of a major investment firm. She'd attended my party as a guest of my mentor, and, in her words, had been deeply impressed by the grace I showed in adversity. "We're looking for someone with vision and grit to join our venture capital team," she wrote. "Let's talk." I blinked at the message, unsure whether to laugh or cry. All my life, I'd chased my family's approval only to find validation from a stranger who'd witnessed my lowest moment. Around the same time, another envelope arrived, this one hand-delivered by a quiet, bespectacled woman I recognized as my mother's longtime attorney, Mrs. Green. She asked to come in, her expression unreadable. We sat in the living room, the city lights stretching out beneath us. "I'm not here on your mother's behalf," she said gently. "I wanted you to have this." She slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were documents relating to the Madison Family Trust, a maze of legal language amendments, and buried among them a recent change stripping me of my rights as a beneficiary. But there was something else, an addendum signed by my late grandmother years before, one that named me as an alternate trustee should any direct heir be proven unfit by public action or scandal. Mrs. Green tapped the page. "The language is broad. The recent events, well, they might be grounds to challenge your removal, especially since the public leak revealed your family's motives so starkly." She paused. "You have more power than you realize, Charlotte." It was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. For a moment, I saw myself not as the family disappointment, but as someone who could fight back quietly legally with the same determination I'd used to build my career. Mrs. Green offered to help pro bono. "Your grandmother was a formidable woman. I think she'd want you to stand up for yourself now." With renewed focus, I threw myself into work. I took meetings with Evelyn's firm, contributed to investment pitches, and found myself not only welcomed but valued. My ideas, once dismissed at the family table, were debated and respected. For the first time, I experienced the strange joy of being measured by my abilities, not my birth order. The story of my family's betrayal continued to circulate, sometimes as cautionary tales, sometimes as inspiration. People sent letters and emails sharing pain, hope, and hard-won wisdom. I kept a few of them taped to my fridge. "You helped me stand up to my own family." I realized my worth isn't defined by their approval. Every note was a small, silent victory. And as for the legal battle, it simmered in the background, equal parts exhausting and exhilarating. My family, blindsided by the challenge to the trust, tried to reach out through intermediaries. My father's terse email. "Let's resolve this quietly for everyone's sake." Olivia's voicemail, brittle with guilt. "We never meant for things to go so far. Please, Char, let's talk." I listened, but for once I did not rush to make things easier for them. Have you ever turned the tables on those who underestimated you? If so, you'll understand the peculiar satisfaction that comes from standing your ground, from realizing that you are no longer the family's afterthought, you are the one writing the next chapter. Little did I know the greatest confrontation was still ahead, and that I would soon face my family, not as the forgotten child, but as a force they could no longer ignore. The legal challenge moved slowly, as such things do. There were weeks of back and forth with lawyers, careful meetings in high-rise conference rooms, endless reviews of documents and intent. I moved through these days with an unfamiliar mix of anxiety and purpose. There is something both exhilarating and sobering about discovering you finally have leverage, legal or otherwise, over the people who once held every card. It was Lila who urged me to keep going when I wavered. "They took your place for granted for 30 years, she said. "It's not revenge, Charlotte. It's justice. It's the start of your own story." I clung to that. Even so, I'd be lying if I said I didn't wrestle with guilt. There's a peculiar kind of sorrow in bringing your family to task, even when they deserve it. Some nights I would wake in the dark, my mind full of childhood memories, shared summer picnics, snow days, building forts in the yard, my mother's voice humming in the kitchen before she fell silent to the world outside Olivia. But nostalgia is a wily thing. It smooths the sharp edges of the past, hiding the truth under a thin layer of longing. By spring, the hearing date was set. The family would meet in mediation, a process designed, they said, for privacy and discretion. Yet word had already leaked: a well-timed article in a financial journal, a viral tweet about the Madison Trust scandal, complete with speculation about motives, inheritances, and family grudges. I watched as old friends and distant relatives sent messages, some curious, others quietly supportive. Strangers began recognizing me on the street, not for my own work, but as the one who stood up to her family. It was strange and at times overwhelming. The day of the mediation arrived bright and cold. I wore my favorite suit, a deep navy, simple lines, nothing ostentatious. As I rode the elevator up to the 36th floor, I steadied my breathing, thinking of all the days I'd spent wishing for my family's approval and how far away that dream seemed now. We gathered in a sleek, windowless room, sunlight filtered through frosted glass. My father sat rigid at one end of the table, hands folded, his jaw tight with pride and anger. My mother avoided my gaze, her lips pressed in a line, while Olivia glanced between us with a restless, almost desperate energy. Their attorney began with pleasantries, then pivoted to business, his tone, crisp words sharp as a knife. I listened quietly at first, letting them lay out their grievances, the pain I'd caused by bringing our private affairs into the public eye, the misunderstanding over my removal from the trust, the importance of unity and discretion. I recognized the tactics: minimize, reframe, guilt, and when all else failed, threaten. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly, careful to keep my voice steady. For years, I did everything I could to earn your love and respect, I said, looking each of them in the eye. I worked for what I have built my life from scratch, supported you even when I was invisible. And yet when I finally achieved something for myself, you chose to humiliate me, not just in private but for the world to see. I'm not here to destroy this family. I'm here to protect what little dignity I have left and to honor the wishes of the one-person grandmother who saw my worth before anyone else did. The room was silent. My father's face flushed. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Olivia, always the peacemaker, broke first. Char, I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just caught in the middle. You know how hard it is being the one everyone looks to. Her words faltered. For a moment I saw the little girl I'd played with in the garden before rivalry and expectations stole our innocence. Olivia, I said softly, I understand more than you think. But understanding doesn't mean excusing. You had choices just like I did. Their lawyer tried a new tack. What do you want, Charlotte? A, pay out your name back on the trust. Public vindication. The word vindication hung in the air, bitter and electric. I looked at Mrs. Green, who nodded almost imperceptibly. What I want, I said, is a formal acknowledgement that I was wrongfully removed from my position as trustee. I want my share of the inheritance restored as my grandmother intended. And I want an official letter of apology from the family acknowledging the public harm done to my reputation. My voice did not waver. There was pushback, of course. Offers of private settlements, vague promises of reconciliation if only I would drop the public battle. But Mrs. Green was relentless, armed with evidence: the leaked group chat, years of correspondence, the original trust amendment. In the end, faced with the risk of a drawn-out, very public lawsuit, my family relented. The trust was restored. My name returned to its rightful place, and a public statement of apology was drafted, reviewed by lawyers, and released to the press. The news spread quickly. Headlines told the story in bright, blunt words: daughter fights, family wins back, legacy. For a week my face appeared in magazines and on news sites. People reached out, some to congratulate, some to criticize, some simply to share their own wounds. There is a strange fellowship in the scars we bear from the families who made us. But the true confrontation, the real reckoning, came not in that sterile office, but weeks later at a charity gala hosted by Evelyn Hart's firm. I had been invited as a guest of honor, not for my last name but for my work in supporting women entrepreneurs, a program I'd helped design and launch in the months since the party. As I stood at the edge of the ballroom surveying the crowd, investors, founders, artists, reporters, I saw my family across the room. They had come, I realized, because attendance meant something in their world. They smiled for the cameras, accepted compliments, performed their roles with ease. I felt a wave of old longing rise, one last fleeting urge to seek their approval. But then Evelyn raised her glass and called me to the stage. The applause was genuine, thunderous, not for being a Madison, but for being myself. I looked out over the sea of faces, saw Lila beaming, Mrs. Green nodding, strangers cheering. And in that moment, I let go of the last thread tying me to the old story. After the speech, my mother approached me, voice low. You know, your father never meant for things to go so far. He struggles with pride. She reached for my hand, but I gently withdrew it. Maybe so, I said. But pride is a choice. So is kindness. I hope someday you'll remember that. Olivia too tried to bridge the gap. Maybe we can start again, she said, eyes wide with hope and hurt. I shook my head, not in anger but in certainty. We're not the same people we were. I wish you well, but I need to move forward on my own terms. I walked away, not with bitterness, but with relief. The final act of revenge was in truth an act of release. I had reclaimed my name, my legacy, and most importantly, my sense of self. If you have ever confronted those who hurt you and found the strength to choose your own peace, you know the victory is not in their defeat, but in your own freedom. The next chapter was waiting bright and unwritten. 16 months have passed since that final confrontation, a time that now feels both recent and impossibly distant, as if a storm has moved on, leaving the sky unrecognizable and clear. The first thing I noticed in this new chapter was the quiet, not the aching silence of neglect, but the gentle peace of days no longer shaped by anxiety or expectation. My home, once a monument to longing, has become my sanctuary. I filled it with things that made me smile: art from local galleries, cookbooks collected from street fairs, plants that thrived in the sunny corners of my kitchen. I hosted small dinners, inviting colleagues and friends who understood the difference between presence and performance. Sometimes I woke early just to stand on my balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city below, the sunrise coloring the world gold and new. The penthouse no longer reminded me of what I lacked. It became the evidence of what I'd earned and of the freedom that followed. Professionally, the changes were even more profound. My role with Evelyn Hart's firm grew quickly, from advisor to partner to director of our new impact initiative for women-led startups. We invested not just in companies, but in stories: single mothers launching food brands from tiny apartments, refugees rebuilding lives with the help of microloans, artists opening studios in neighborhoods the world had forgotten. I found myself drawn to people whose resilience mirrored my own, and in mentoring them, I rediscovered my purpose. I was invited to speak at universities, not about family drama, but about forging your own path in a world that often resists it. For the first time, my value was measured by the difference I made, not by any family name. I built what I'd always longed for: a chosen family. Lila became my constant assister by every measure but blood. She would show up with groceries when deadlines loomed, or drag me out for walks along the river when my heart felt heavy. Our circle grew slowly and deliberately. A fellow director who loved chess and poetry, a neighbor who hosted impromptu brunches, the lawyer who had once handed me my future in a quiet envelope. We celebrated birthdays, mourned losses, held each other up when the world pressed down. There was no hierarchy, no golden child, only the quiet, steadfast loyalty of people who chose each other day after day. My biological family. The news of my restored inheritance traveled quickly through old circles. There were attempts at reconciliation, all polite but perfunctory. My father sent a brief letter when his company faced a cash flow crisis, hinting at mutual benefit. My mother called when a cousin's wedding made headlines, her voice full of carefully worded nostalgia. Olivia wrote once a long emotional email about regret, about wishing things could be different. I responded kindly but with boundaries. The past, I realized, did not need to be rewritten for my future to be bright. The old pain never vanished entirely. Sometimes in the quiet moments between meetings or in the hour before sleep, memories returned: the sting of childhood exclusion, the hollow ache of being overlooked. But they came less often, and when they did, I greeted them not as enemies but as distant travelers, a part of my story, but no longer its author. I started new traditions. Every autumn I hosted a thankfulness brunch, inviting friends and colleagues to share stories of resilience and hope. We filled the rooms with laughter and warmth, trading recipes and encouragement, weaving together a tapestry of lives built from courage, not accident of birth. I kept a small notebook where I jotted down quotes that inspired me, reminders that our worth is not decided by others' blindness. The one I returned to most often was: this family is not a right but a privilege earned by love and respect. I learned to celebrate my own milestones. When our firm crossed the $10 million mark in social impact investments, I took Lila and a handful of colleagues to dinner at the very French bistro where I had once toasted my own freedom. We laughed until the candles guttered out, toasting not only what we had achieved, but how far we had come. It was, I realized, the family dinner I had longed for my whole life, one I had built myself from scratch. If you have ever had to redefine your understanding of family, if you have ever stood at the edge of a new beginning, unsure if you had the strength to start again, I hope you know you are not alone. Blood may tie us to our beginnings, but it is choice, kindness, and courage that shape our endings. I would love to hear your thoughts below. Have you ever chosen a new family? Do you believe forgiveness is owed or earned? As I write these final words, the city outside my window shimmers with possibility. My story, once defined by exclusion and longing, is now a testament to the power of starting over. The lesson is simple though not easy. You are allowed to outgrow your roots to plant yourself where you can truly thrive. In the end, the greatest revenge is not in winning back what was taken, but in building a life so rich and full that you no longer need it. Thank you for listening, for sharing in my journey. If you've made it this far, know that you too are part of my chosen family now.